The ones moving against you aren't aiming for loud chaos, because open violence is inefficient and exposes their hand. If their goal were direct confrontation, they would have chosen force and immediate visibility instead. What they want instead is something far more precise and far more silent. Access to your emotions, your reactions, your timing, and your internal balance. Machiavelli warned that the greatest threat is not the enemy who strikes. It is the enemy who studies you like a pattern waiting to be repeated. Observation turns behavior into a weapon sharpened by your own habits. Once your reactions are known, your future choices stop belonging to you. Most people believe enemies act from anger, resentment, or wounded pride. That belief creates blindness, because calculation wears a calmer face. They provoke not to fight, but to measure the depth of your emotional ground. They delay not to hesitate, but to observe how quickly you begin to unravel. They remain silent not because they are weak, but because they are listening. In Machiavellian terms, every emotional response is a confession of position. It reveals insecurity, attachment, and hunger for control in a single moment. Power leaks away the moment you become readable to an observing mind. When your anger appears on schedule, your explanations arrive on demand. When your emotions follow patterns, you stop being unpredictable. And the predictable man stops being a threat worth fearing. Machiavelli understood that men are ruled by expectation more than by force. When your enemy knows what you will do next, resistance becomes unnecessary. They no longer push against you, they guide you where they want. This is how most people lose without realizing they entered a game. They believe reacting proves strength, defending proves innocence, and speaking proves confidence. In reality, reaction locks you into another person's rhythm and timing. Defense accepts their frame, and speech hands them usable material. Machiavelli wrote that authority belongs to those who cannot be easily interpreted. Ambiguity is not confusion, it is a form of psychological armor. This is not a lesson in motivation or surface-level confidence. It is a lesson in becoming strategically invisible to emotional pressure. It is about removing emotional access until feedback completely disappears. When feedback vanishes, certainty begins to collapse inside the enemy's mind. When certainty collapses, mistakes appear without being forced. The enemy escalates not because you threaten them, but because they no longer understand you. Machiavelli never advised seeking love or fairness inside power struggles. He advised control of perception, distance from impulse, and mastery of timing. He understood that those who rush to clarify surrender their advantage. Those who crave resolution hand over their leverage. The mind that demands to be understood becomes easy to guide. The mind that withholds becomes difficult to govern. By the end of this, you will not feel inspired or comforted. You will feel insulated from emotional intrusion and strategic pressure. You will understand how enemies test boundaries without ever touching them. How silence becomes a form of weight pressing on the other side. How delay rewrites hierarchy and denies emotional closure. This is not about winning arguments or dominating conversations. It is about becoming unreachable to those who seek control. Drop this affirmation in the comments before moving forward. I am unreadable to those who seek to measure me. Number 1. Enemies aim for emotional authority, not direct confrontation. Direct force is expensive because it reveals intent and invites resistance. Machiavelli observed that intelligent opponents prefer influence over impact. They guide behavior without appearing responsible for the outcome. Emotional access allows this to happen quietly and without visibility. Once they enter your emotional space, they no longer need to oppose you. They only need to steer you. The first objective is never victory, it is permission. Permission to disturb your internal balance and shift your emotional state. Permission to influence your decisions without touching them directly. Provocation becomes the key that opens this hidden door. A remark, a delay, a gesture, or a calculated withdrawal. Each action is designed to test the stability of your inner structure. The moment you respond emotionally, the system activates. From that point forward, they stop guessing and start adjusting. Hierarchy is not created by dominance alone, it is shaped by emotional flow. The one who controls the emotional direction controls the structure. When you become irritated, rushed, or eager to correct assumptions, you are no longer acting freely, you are responding to a design. Machiavelli understood that influence is strongest when it feels self-chosen. Most people misunderstand provocation as an attempt to insult. In reality, it is an attempt to collect data. Emotional spikes reveal pressure points and hidden attachments. Calm moments reveal expectations and internal demands. Sudden reactions expose what you care about most. From these signals, a behavioral map begins to form. Once mapped, manipulation no longer requires effort. The enemy presses only where a response is guaranteed. Machiavelli once warned that men obey their immediate needs more than their reason. The desire to be respected, understood, or justified becomes leverage. When those needs become visible, they can be used without force. The enemy no longer confronts you, they stimulate you. Control rarely announces itself with noise or command. It operates through rhythm and timing. Who speaks first, who waits, who explains, who reacts. These small movements determine rank without being acknowledged. The one who loses emotional balance first accepts a lower position. From that moment, interaction becomes uneven. One side probes, the other side adjusts. One side leads, the other side follows. This is why emotional discipline is not suppression. It is strategic defense. When emotions remain inaccessible, leverage disappears. Without leverage, the enemy must reveal themselves. They either escalate openly or withdraw completely. Both choices expose intent. Machiavelli advised rulers to avoid dependence on emotional exchange. Dependence creates vulnerability, and vulnerability invites control. Independence, even in silence, creates uncertainty. Once you recognize that enemies seek authority over emotion, behavior changes. You stop reacting to irritation and stop correcting false assumptions. You stop explaining motives and justifying actions. Instead, you observe without providing relief. Pressure remains unanswered, and the other side begins to doubt. Confidence erodes into anxiety and hesitation. The critical shift is understanding that neutrality is not weakness. It is refusal. Refusal to be measured, positioned, or shaped. When emotions become unavailable, strategic control dissolves. The enemy no longer interacts with a person. They interact with a wall. Now drop this affirmation in the comments. My emotions are inaccessible to those who seek control. Number 2, refuse reaction to break their leverage. Reaction is never neutral. The instant you respond, you surrender initiative. Every movement, every word, every twitch becomes data. Machiavelli understood that true power belongs to the one who acts deliberately, not impulsively. Reaction places you inside a frame you did not create. It forces motion according to rules set before you were aware a game had begun. Once you respond, you confirm relevance. You signal that an external force controls your internal state. Every gesture communicates information. Tone exposes priority. Speed exposes urgency. Words reveal intention. Silence after provocation signals strength, but speech exposes shape. Enemies observe these cues meticulously because they eliminate uncertainty. Uncertainty is dangerous, clarity is safety. Every response you offer simplifies their calculations. It shortens their decision tree, turning complexity into predictability. The first person to react is structurally weaker. This is not theory, it is reality. Reaction implies adjustment. Adjustment implies dependence. True authority does not justify itself in real time. Leadership does not rush to explain. Machiavelli noted that those who hurry to defend appear guilty even when innocent, because urgency betrays imbalance. Balance is the foundation of command. Most believe reaction demonstrates confidence. In truth, it signals exposure. Exposure creates access. Access creates control. When someone knows exactly how to elicit a reply, they control your rhythm. They can exhaust you, redirect you, pace you. Reaction hands them the steering wheel. From that moment, you are not navigating, you are correcting. Refusal to react disrupts the mechanism entirely. When no response arrives, the enemy is left without confirmation. Their assumptions remain untested, their pressure floats without landing. This absence generates discomfort because control demands feedback. Without it, certainty erodes. Confidence falters. Timing, meaning, and influence begin to crumble. Machiavellian power often appears passive to the untrained eye. In reality, it is selective engagement. Reactionlessness is not indifference. It is discipline. It is a conscious choice to deny access. When you do not respond, you are not avoiding conflict, you are forcing it to collapse under its own weight. Provocation demands participation. Without your engagement, the provocateur is exposed. Non-response reverses the psychological burden. Instead of you managing emotion, the enemy must manage uncertainty. Silence becomes a mirror. They project motives, imagine strategies, and fill the void with fear. This internal noise triggers overreach. Overreach generates mistakes. Machiavelli understood that enemies defeat themselves when clarity is denied. Confusion invites error far faster than direct opposition. Refusing reaction preserves internal authority. You remain centered. Your choices are deliberate, not rushed. Your actions follow intention, not impulse. This separation between stimulus and response consolidates dominance naturally. No announcement is necessary. Power manifests through consistent behavior, not display. Another consequence enemies rarely anticipate. When reactions vanish, interest fades. Manipulation relies on effect. If no effect appears, effort feels wasted. The enemy either escalates openly or disengages entirely. Both outcomes favor you. Escalation reveals intent. Withdrawal confirms loss of influence. Leverage dissolves in either case. Machiavelli warned that revealing inner workings invites interference. Reaction exposes machinery. Stillness hides it. The immovable cannot be governed. Refusal to react is not weakness. It is insulation. It establishes distance from external pressure. Distance creates freedom. Freedom enables choice. Power begins when reaction ends. Number 3, use silence as active psychological pressure. Silence is rarely emptiness. It is compressed density, tension without release. Machiavelli recognized that the undefined becomes feared, and fear gains weight. Silence removes reference points. With no verbal signal, emotional cue, or visible intent, the opposing mind is forced inward. Pressure does not vanish, it amplifies. Speech resolves tension. Silence preserves it. Enemies rely on resolution because it restores control. When you speak, you anchor interpretation. When you remain silent, interpretation spirals out of your hands. The enemy begins assigning meaning where none exists. That meaning is shaped by their own insecurity, not your intent. Imbalance forms. Silence functions as active force, denying orientation. Without orientation, timing collapses. Enemies hesitate, advance incorrectly, or retreat prematurely. Every move exposes dependence on feedback. Machiavelli knew that uncertainty erodes resolve faster than confrontation. A visible enemy can be countered. An unreadable one cannot. Communication holds a hierarchy. Frequent speakers respond, the last speaker defines reality, the silent exist outside the frame. Silence lifts you above exchange. Observation shifts gravity. The observed becomes reactive. The observer becomes central. Machiavelli once said, "Whoever causes another to gain power ruins himself." Silence prevents others from wielding authority over you. When you offer nothing, no advantage can be taken. Withholding explanation blocks leverage. Human minds resist unresolved loops. Silence creates a loop with no exit. Unresolved internal noise multiplies. Questions repeat. Assumptions multiply. The enemy becomes preoccupied with interpretation, not action. While they construct meaning, you remain unmoved. Psychological pressure compounds naturally over time. The longer silence persists, the heavier it feels. At first, enemies may misinterpret stillness as weakness. The illusion fades quickly when no collapse follows. Confusion becomes doubt, doubt breeds anxiety, anxiety exposes vulnerability. Silence removes emotional symmetry. When one side exerts urgency and the other remains still, imbalance is visible. Effort without response feels humiliating. Dependency becomes clear. The enemy realizes they invest energy into someone who does not reciprocate. Awareness erodes confidence. Strategic silence is not withdrawal, it is positioning. You are present without engagement, available without access, visible without explanation. This stance is difficult to challenge, it lacks surface. Attacks slide off. Questions remain unanswered. Pressure rebounds onto the source. Machiavelli advised leaders to avoid unnecessary explanation because it invites judgment. Silence invites projection. Projection exposes the enemy's inner landscape. Fears emerge. Priorities surface. You learn without revealing. Consistent silence alters status. Others adjust around it. Conversations slow. Expectations shift. Your stillness becomes a reference. This is psychological gravity. It attracts attention without demand. Silence protects timing. Words lock you into moments. Silence keeps options open. When speech arrives after absence, it carries weight. Absence sharpens presence. Scarcity increases value. Silence creates scarcity of access. Discipline is essential. Silence must be intentional, not emotional. It is refusal, not avoidance. Once mastered, silence becomes pressure without aggression, influence without movement, control without effort. The unreadable individual becomes the center of reaction. Others orbit, overthink, and adjust. You remain unchanged. This is the power of silence. Number 4, control time to control outcomes. Time is the most underestimated instrument of power. Machiavelli recognized that whoever dictates tempo dictates behavior. Urgency is rarely natural. It is manufactured to compress judgment, weaken discernment, and force premature commitment. When pressure accelerates the clock, mistakes follow. Those who accept imposed speed surrender control unknowingly. Enemies introduce haste to limit choice. Rapid decisions feel decisive, yet they often serve the initiator. Speed favors the one who prepared earlier. The one who rushes is already behind. Machiavelli warned that impulsive action pleases adversaries because momentum can be redirected, but intention cannot. Delay is not indecision, it is disruption. Slowing the exchange fractures expectation. Enemies plan sequences based on predicted windows. When those windows collapse, their structure fails. Waiting transfers emotional weight. Anticipation breeds tension. Tension clouds clarity. Time asymmetry establishes hierarchy. The one comfortable waiting signals independence. The one demanding immediacy reveals need. Need creates vulnerability. Authority appears calm because it does not fear loss through delay. Anxiety belongs to those who feel they might lose advantage if control is not maintained. Refusing urgency destabilizes opponents by denying completion. Their strategy remains unfinished. They hold pressure with no outlet. Extended time increases emotional investment. Investment clouds judgment. Decisions become reactive. The longer they wait, the stronger their desire for resolution. Desire becomes leverage. Long pauses followed by deliberate action amplify impact. Machiavelli understood perception outweighs effort. Measured responses signal dominance regardless of content. Enemies attempt to control tempo with deadlines, demands, and implied consequences. These rely on fear of loss. Ignoring imposed timelines redefines stakes. Loss becomes theirs. Their urgency exposes dependency. Waiting also allows situations to mature. Early movement reveals little, late movement reveals patterns. Delayed actors gather information without giving any. The enemy shows impatience, shifts tone, reveals priorities. Each adjustment exposes motive. Patience allows others to reveal themselves fully before engagement. Time protects positioning. Immediate action locks context. Delay keeps flexibility. Circumstances shift, delayed actors retain freedom. Those who moved early must defend choices. Defense drains power. Waiting preserves optionality. Machiavelli observed that rulers who rushed lost authority, appearing controlled by events rather than directing them. Those who waited appeared sovereign. Sovereignty is recognized through calm pacing. Calm pacing signals command over outcome. Controlling time neutralizes manipulation. Manipulation requires synchronization. When timing is disrupted, influence weakens. Attempts feel mistimed. Mistiming erodes credibility. Waiting carries psychological cost underestimated by many. Internal friction increases. Thoughts loop. Confidence falters. Enemies doubt assumptions. Doubt triggers overcorrection. Overcorrection reveals weakness. This process unfolds without your involvement. Controlling time requires internal stability. Tolerance for uncertainty is essential. Most rush because silence feels uncomfortable. Machiavellian power tolerates discomfort, understanding its function. Discomfort transferred is leverage gained. Dictating tempo decides when meaning appears, when action matters, and when engagement begins. Authority eliminates force. Control of time silently restructures interaction. Drop this in the comments. I control the pace. Number 5. Break the enemy's expectations. Enemies do not prepare for truth. They prepare for habit. Machiavelli understood that anticipation is built on pattern. The mind seeks shortcuts. Repetition creates them. Once a pattern is assumed, planning feels comfortable, and comfort dulls vigilance. When an enemy believes they know your behavior, critical thinking fades. This is the opening. Expectation functions like a script. It tells them when you will respond, how you act, and what form resistance will take. That script becomes a safety net they lean on. When behavior suddenly diverges, confusion replaces confidence. Confusion interrupts execution. Failed execution creates vulnerability. Predictability is not always weakness. Machiavelli never advised constant chaos. He advised control. Moments of consistency lower suspicion and reduce friction. Stability can act as camouflage. Danger arises when consistency becomes identity. Once behavior is assumed fixed, it can be exploited repeatedly. The enemy stops adapting. They simply repeat what worked before. Breaking expectation is not randomness. Randomness lacks intent. Strategic deviation is precise. It occurs at decisive moments, not constantly. When pressure peaks and a familiar response is expected, deviation carries maximum impact. The enemy commits based on assumption. When that assumption fails, hesitation fractures momentum. Machiavelli once said, "A prince should not depart from good if possible, but know how to enter into evil when forced by necessity." This is not moral advice. It is strategic flexibility. Adaptability under pressure is dominance. When expectation locks behavior, flexibility becomes control. Enemies rely on emotional prediction. They assume irritation, explanation, retreat, or escalation. When none appear, their model collapses. They must rebuild understanding mid-interaction. Rebuilding consumes attention. Attention diverted from execution produces mistakes. There is also a psychological cost to being wrong. When forecasts fail, doubt appears. Doubt weakens future predictions. Confidence erodes incrementally. One broken expectation infects the next encounter. Strategic inconsistency disrupts manipulation. Manipulation requires reliable cause and effect. When actions stop producing expected reactions, influence weakens. The manipulator loses calibration. They overadjust. Overadjustment exposes intent. Exposure eliminates subtlety. Machiavelli understood that appearing simple while being complex is power. Enemies relax when they believe they understand you. That relaxation is dangerous. When complexity reveals itself unexpectedly, response time collapses. They are forced to think under pressure. Expectation governs escalation. Enemies decide how far to go based on predicted resistance. If resistance shifts or disappears, escalation misfires. They advance too far or retreat too early. Both create opportunity. Breaking expectation does not require drama. Absence can suffice. Restraint may become deviation. Calm can replace intensity. Delay may replace speed. Contrast is key. The greater the contrast between expectation and reality, the stronger the psychological impact. When enemies cannot rely on prediction, they become cautious. Caution slows initiative. Initiative loss transfers advantage. They wait. They hesitate. They observe. In that pause, control shifts. Machiavelli valued adaptability because rigid minds collapse under changing conditions. Flexibility keeps power mobile. Mobility prevents entrapment. When behavior cannot be mapped, strategy cannot be finalized. The enemy remains incomplete. Expectation is comfort. Removing it creates instability. Instability weakens structure. Structure failure ends dominance. By controlling when and how expectations are broken, you dictate psychological terrain. The moment the enemy realizes they no longer understand you, the balance tilts. They are no longer playing the game they prepared for. They react to one they cannot define. Number 6, deny closure to collapse their mental stability. The human mind is not built to tolerate unfinished narratives. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. People seek resolution because resolution restores order. When order is withheld, tension lingers. Lingering tension consumes attention, drains energy, and distorts judgment. Denying closure is not cruelty. It is strategic withdrawal from psychological exchange. Enemies do not always seek victory. Often they seek explanation. They want acknowledgement, reaction, or recognition. Any conclusion reassures them influence still exists. When you remove access without explanation, the loop remains open. An open loop is not neutral. It pulls focus inward repeatedly. The enemy replays events, searching for meaning that does not exist. Anger burns quickly. Confusion persists. Anger releases energy. Uncertainty traps it. Machiavelli understood punishment ends conflict. Ambiguity prolongs dominance. Without clear endings, the mind continues working long after interaction ends. This continued effort benefits one side only, the absent one. Closure restores hierarchy. When you explain, justify, or clarify, you acknowledge the other party's authority. That acknowledgement elevates them. Denial of closure removes elevation. It communicates without words that understanding is unnecessary. Irrelevance destabilizes more than opposition. Silence after engagement differs from silence before it. After engagement, absence feels intentional. It feels final without explanation. This combination is powerful. It creates a void where meaning should exist. The enemy fills it with self-generated narratives. Those narratives often turn inward. Doubt replaces certainty. Machiavelli recognized those who crave resolution are easy to control. They chase answers, revealing desperation. Every attempt to regain access exposes need. Need reverses power. The one who wants closure is already beneath the one who denies it. There is a temptation to resolve matters cleanly, finish conversations, explain motives, clarify misunderstandings. This comes from empathy, not strategy. Machiavellian power resists it because clarity benefits the listener more than the speaker. When clarity is denied, leverage remains intact. Once closure is withheld, consistency becomes critical. A single explanation destroys the effect. The mind resets. The loop closes. Control dissolves. Denial must be complete, sustained. Partial closure invites renewed pursuit. Full denial ends it silently. Unresolved situations create obsession. Obsession narrows perception. Narrow perception leads to error. Enemies interpret unrelated events as signals. They overanalyze, misread neutrality as intent. Distortion weakens action. Focus misallocates. Machiavelli understood power does not require presence. It requires impact. Denying closure allows impact to persist without effort. The enemy continues engaging alone. You remain untouched. This asymmetry is dominance. There is also protection in denial. Refusing explanation preserves internal reasoning. Motives remain private. Intent remains concealed. Concealment prevents counter-strategy. What cannot be understood cannot be anticipated. Closure also prevents emotional release. Release allows movement. Denial traps emotion. Trapped emotion seeks outlets. Outlets appear as escalation, overreach, exposure. Each reveals more than intended. Each weakens position. Indifference is insulation. It removes incentive. Without incentive, manipulation collapses. The enemy cannot progress. They are stalled internally. Machiavelli advised rulers to withdraw favor without explanation because explanation invites resistance. Silence ends negotiation. Denial ends pursuit. When closure is unavailable, engagement stops, but imbalance persists. Drop the affirmation in the comments. I owe no closure. Number 7. Reach psychological untouchability. The final stage of dominance is not confrontation. It is separation. Machiavelli understood the highest control occurs when influence fails entirely. Psychological untouchability is not isolation. It is insulation from interference. External forces can no longer shape internal direction. Power stabilizes. Identity becomes internally complete. Actions no longer require validation. Decisions no longer depend on approval. Behavior flows from structure, not stimulus. Enemies sense the shift immediately. Their usual methods lose traction. Provocation falls flat. Delay has no effect. Escalation produces no movement. Without response, influence dies. Untouchability changes dynamics silently. Absence communicates finality. Stillness is resolved. Machiavelli recognized that the unmoved cannot be managed. When enemies lose access, they often increase intensity. Escalation is not strength. It is loss of relevance. They push harder because usual signals are gone. Their behavior becomes visible. Visibility removes advantage. The quiet individual becomes the reference point. Others orbit them. Psychological untouchability eliminates internal conflict. Motives are clear internally. External noise loses power. Confusion fades. Clarity emerges. Consistency reinforces authority. Authority is recognized through calm presence. Power endures when uncontested. Contest invites exposure. Withdrawal removes the battlefield entirely. When no longer part of the enemy's equation, they cannot win or lose. They simply become irrelevant. This stage also protects energy. Engagement consumes resources. Untouchability conserves them. While others react, explain, defend, you move forward. Progress is asymmetric. Distance grows. The gap becomes insurmountable. Untouchability does not require emotional numbness. It requires selectivity. Emotions exist but are not available externally. Privacy is power. Private states cannot be weaponized. Machiavellian dominance is often mistaken for aggression. It is restraint guided by understanding. Understanding removes urgency. Urgency invites error. When urgency disappears, precision replaces it. Precision shapes outcomes. Enemies stop attempting influence because effort produces nothing. Silence greets pressure. Stillness meets escalation. Absence follows intrusion. Cost-benefit collapses. Without return, investment ends. Influence starves. Psychological untouchability reshapes self-perception. Confidence no longer needs reinforcement. Strength no longer seeks display. Calm replaces tension. Internal alignment becomes externally visible. Others sense it without explanation. Respect follows naturally. Dependency creates access. Access invites control. Untouchability severs this chain. Once severed, it cannot be repaired without consent. Consent is never given. Conflict ends before it begins. Influence attempts fail silently. The enemy does not feel defeated. They feel disconnected. Disconnection is final. There is nothing to argue with, provoke, or reach. This is the highest victory. Not dominance through force. Not triumph through display. But freedom from manipulation. Freedom from reaction. Freedom from psychological reach. When you reach this stage, you do not need to win. You are no longer played. Power is rarely in what you take. It is in what cannot be taken. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. Most chase influence as if it were a prize. They argue, explain, justify, exhaust themselves pursuing control that was never theirs. True mastery is the opposite. It is inaccessibility. It is a position so stable attempts to disturb it fail before they begin. The enemy orbits you. You do not orbit them. Influence is denied, not seized. Victory is not measured in collapse of others, but in immunity to collapse. When your mind is untouchable, provocation is irrelevant. Anger, fear, or desire cannot move you. You are anchored internally. Identity, choices, and responses belong solely to you. Machiavelli insisted rulers must never show weakness. Weakness invites probing. Strength hides behind stillness. The untouchable mind is unreadable, unmovable, unassailable. Every strategy in this video contributes to this state. Refusing reaction, mastering silence, controlling time, breaking expectation, and denying closure are not tactics to win arguments. They remove you from the equation entirely. The one who cannot be manipulated, predicted, or provoked operates above the battlefield. Victories are invisible but absolute. You dictate without movement, influence without effort. You remain untouched while the world spins around you. You do not need to justify, explain, or prove yourself. Validation is irrelevant. Approval is unnecessary. The highest power occurs when engagement is optional, not required. When the enemy escalates, they expose themselves. When they wait, they reveal dependence. And in both cases, your position remains intact. Silence, stillness, and strategic restraint are ultimate weapons. They require discipline, patience, and understanding. Apply these principles, and you will notice profound change. People will miscalculate your moves. Attempts to provoke will fail. Emotional traps will be ineffective. You will move freely, think clearly, and act deliberately. Conflict no longer controls you. You control its context. This is not domination. It is liberation. Before we end, like, share, and subscribe. Drop a comment. I am untouchable. Every time you reinforce this mindset, you strengthen your mental armor. Power is not in what you destroy. It is in what cannot touch you. When influence ends, conflict ends. When conflict ends, freedom begins. Be untouchable. Be strategic. Be invisible. The highest victory is not defeating enemies. It is becoming impossible for them to reach.